My maiden name was Lade, L-A-D-E. That would have been Lottie in Germany. My grandparents on my daddy's side were both from Germany. He became a sailor part of the time and cooked while working as a sailor. Eventually, when he came to the United States, he was a carpenter, and he said painter because he meant he painted the houses, but he was also an artist to an extent and enjoyed, being creative. And now he was John Frederick Lottie, and his wife, my grandmother, was Marie Ernestine Spearling, and she was a wonderful homemaker, cook, and seamstress, and she enjoyed being the mother and the wife. They ended up living in East Texas because of a health issue with her, but it was all okay, and they had a farm. I was born in Huntsville, Texas, because that's where my daddy was teaching at Sam Houston State, and but then we moved to Waco while I was still young. In Huntsville, Texas, when my daddy was the teacher there teaching biology, my mother was in his class. There's about a 6-7 years difference in age there. And they eventually dated and married, and I was born there. We lived near Dallas for a little while because Daddy got his bachelor's degree from SMU and eventually his master's from Baylor in Waco. But that was our family history up till then. He liked teaching because he enjoyed the students so much. He was a good teacher. My mother was a teacher until I was born, and then she stayed home and babysat with me, and then my brother, and then my sister. And I was born in 1927, so I was a child a long time because I liked being a child. We got to play in the yard, and we got to go see. We got to go swimming and down at the lake that was nearby, and we got to just have fun. We had a good time. I had a playhouse, what we called it, a playhouse, and I had my dolls in there, and my brother had his little trucks and things in the playhouse, and we told each other stories and I made him laugh and he made me laugh, and we just had a good time as children. For some reason, almost every night before we'd go to bed, my mother reminded Daddy that we hadn't been for a drive. And I know he knew it because he was reminded each night. But anyways, the four of us would get in the car and drive to the downtown section and just enjoy the scenery going and coming. And my brother and I would sit in the back seat and talk about what we saw or what we were seeing. It was an interesting young life, it surely was. We had a happy life. I liked going to school, yes, but I wasn't a person who could hardly wait to get back the next day because I liked to play too. No, we had study time in our house though, so we knew school was important. By we, I mean my brother and my sister when she was born. We knew all along that when we graduated from high school, that was not the end. You go from there to college. That was just part of our life. And we all three did that. A teacher I remember very well as a student was in Waco, Texas. And I actually had 6 good teachers, 1 through 6. But the 6th grade teacher was a person who was preparing us to go into a junior high school. And she wanted us to know some things to expect, because there we'd have more than one teacher, you know. So she built a program for us, and we practiced, and she was kind of a tough teacher as far as the education part was concerned. And but she cared about us as individuals, and we knew that. When I graduated from high school in Waco, I went back to Huntsville to go to Sam Houston State University for one summer. That was the agreement my parents and I had, because Daddy had graduated from Baylor in Waco, and that was assumed to be my university later. I was born in Huntsville, and my name was Eva, E-V-V-A, which was my mother's first name. And her best friend was named Blanche. So my official name was Eva Blanche Lade, and then Eva Blanche May. As soon as I got there, really, that summer, I introduced myself, and she was a what you call a suite mate. She lived next to me, and she said, and I mean, I had just met her. I'd just gotten there that week. And so when I introduced myself to some of the boys and all, she said, what did you say your name is? And I told her. She said, you look like a Pat to me. And so from that day on, I was Pat. Nobody ever said anything different. To this day, I've always been Pat. So the first summer out of high school, I went to Sam Houston in Huntsville because my cousin had asked me to go and be her roommate in the dormitory. She's a little older than I, so at the end of that summer, she went back to, was a teacher somewhere in Texas. But I wanted to stay because by then I thought it was a wonderful school. And I talked my daddy into letting me stay for a while. He said, well, maybe until you finish your freshman year. Well, of course, that was the beginning of my college work. And I not only stayed and got my bachelor's there, I finally got my master's at Sam Houston, too. I had been to some other colleges to take some classes, but I liked Sam Houston, and that's where I met Sid. I lived in Belvin Hall dormitory, and the dorm mother had a party for us to meet the boys from the boys' dormitory. And so that night, I met Sid, and I'd been there well, I was there all summer before he came that fall, and that's when we had our party. And we had a good relationship from the very beginning. He was a physical education major. And then finally, when he got his master's, he got it in administration, and he became a teacher, of course, and then was finally a principal for a good many years. And then the following summer, we were married in Waco, and Sid's mother and daddy were wonderful people, too. We married in Waco, and at my church. And of course, Sid's parents came for the wedding. We didn't have a big wedding; we had a family wedding. And we lived when we got married that summer. Then my daddy had rent houses, and one of the rent houses was available for us to live in that year. And of course, lived down the street from my mother and daddy and brother. As far as I can remember, I always thought I would be a teacher because I enjoyed playing school, and we just heard nice things in our home about being a teacher. My mother and my daddy both enjoyed their jobs, and we just loved kids, you know. I have a wonderful brother and a wonderful sister, and my brother, of course, came right after I did, and he his name is John William Lade. He's a retired teacher of science and enjoyed the students and the subject, and was just always happy being a teacher. And my sister's name is Mickey, M-I-C-K-E-Y, because my mother and daddy decided to give her a nickname to begin with so we wouldn't have all these other names floating around. So she's Mickey Annette, and she is a retired teacher. My brother and I heard so many nice things about teaching, and it just seemed like the only possible thing that we should do, you know, since we were born into it, I guess. My first job was before I actually graduated. You could do that, then get a temporary certification. And I taught in Spiegelville, which is right out of Waco. And we lived in Waco. And I taught there 1 year. And then we decided we'd go for the next year. I mean, that summer, we'd go somewhere kind of for a vacation. So and Spiegelville was a good school, by the way. It was a county school, but I enjoyed it. And we went out to Alpine, Texas, to go to school just for fun. And while we were there, the superintendent from San Benito called the education professor and said he wanted to know about some persons who would be interested in coming to teach there. So what he did, he talked to us and he hired us on the phone and said, I'll send you a contract. And so we even told him that we didn't know that we loved the Valley and we may not be there but 1 year, but we promised him we'd do a good job for 1 year at least. So that's what we did. And oh, it was a wonderful experience, it really was. Although I had 60 students enrolled in my class, they had obligations with their families. Some of them did, or many of them did, to help with their farming or whatever their family's occupation was. And but when they were there, we did everything we were supposed to do. And actually got to the point that some of the parents, although most of them didn't speak English, they would come and visit with me, and then they would realize they needed to help too, so it worked in that way. And some of them could speak English, but many of them couldn't. And I thought I could speak Spanish, but I realized that I was far from being a Spanish teacher. And met a young man, one of many students that I remember. His name is Hassan Moses. Now that was a long time ago, but to this day, Hassan Moses and I still correspond. He is now a retired teacher down there, and he's even been up this way to see me a couple of times. And he's married and has a child, you know. But anyways, there are a few others that I still have contact with, but he's one. We went back to Sam Houston after that and finished our masters. Both of us went on and finished our masters. It was 1957 when we came to Hurst. So I'll go back to about 50 or 51 out at Webb. And we stayed there 4 years. So we count back, see. From there we went to Irving for 2 years, and then we came here, so we can count back those many years. Webb is right out of Arlington, and near Arlington and Mansfield. And I taught first, second, and third grade, and Sid taught fourth, fifth, and sixth grade. We only needed 2 teachers because you didn't have enough of any one grade level to have a teacher for that particular grade level. And then the other, when you got to the 7th and up, they bused them into Mansfield. So Sid and I were the teachers, and Mrs. Rutland was the cook, and the lady who, she didn't want to be called a janitor. She very distinctly made that point, but she was to be the housekeeper. The thing about it was we looked for a rent house out there because we were too far from Arlington and Mansfield, you know, we thought to transport everything. But we couldn't find a place to buy or even to rent. So the school was so big because it had been, a school for 1 through 12. we asked the superintendent and then the school board members if we could make one of the rooms, had all those rooms out there, into an apartment for us. And they said, okay. So we did. And we had a pretty little apartment, but we didn't have a stove in there. We had the apartment, but no stove, no kitchen. So then they said, well, why don't you use the kitchen that Miss Rutland is? So we did that. And for 4 years, that's what we did. And finally, I mean, we loved it out there because the people were wonderful. The children we enjoyed, and they were, you know, mostly from pretty good families, pretty good homes. And so at the end of the 4th year, though, we talked to the superintendent again, and Mr. Stowe, and then the board members, and told them we thought we better move on rather than stay there for the rest of our lives. So Mr. Stowe, then the superintendent, he didn't even work with the Irving School, but he knew about it, and so that's where he sent us. He said, you're going to like Irving. So we taught over there for 2 years, and then the county superintendent had changed. Now Joe Humphreys was over there as the superintendent, and he lived in Euless. And he said, instead of continuing over in Irving, I'd like for you to come over here in Hurst and work here because I know you and all this. So we came and talked to people over here, and then we decided this was where we'd stay. It wasn't H-E-B then, it was H-E, Hurst Euless. We moved to Hurst in 1960, and we've lived here ever since. The town was like almost like a little country town. Highway 10 over there was with Bell Helicopter. That was just it, you know. When you came over this way, you just heard all about Bell Helicopter and everybody else that worked there, you know. And even in the school board meetings, you'd hear different ones talking about Bell Helicopter. But we had 2 restaurants or cafes, as they said, that I can remember. I can't remember the names right now. We had a few grocery stores, drive-in theater, see the movies. There was one somewhere over there on Highway 10. I can't remember exactly where, but we did that. And we had Sunday school class parties, you know. And we liked to eat out at those cafes over there. South Euless had been there for years, and it's been rebuilt now, but when we came, it was the old school. And South Hurst was there. It had been there all those years and was used as a school then, see. And North Hurst, which is Hurst Junior High now, is where I first taught, and that was there. First year we were in this school district, I taught what is now Hurst Junior High. That was North Hurst Elementary School. And the next year, the superintendent, Joe Humphreys, called us in and said, we're going to move you over to the new school that's being built called North Euless Elementary. You'll be the principal, and Pat, you will be one of his teachers. He will be your boss. And then I taught there that half year, and the next year, while I was teaching there with Sid, the superintendent came out and the assistant superintendent came out and they ate lunch with my students and me, and told me that I would not be teaching there anymore. They were going to move me over to the administration building. I said, well, I really like these children out here, you know, I'll just like to stay here. And he said, well, you will be working with children and teachers, and you will like that too. Well, across the hall from the superintendent's office in that building now was the men's restaurant. And when you were in the hall, you opened a door, and then there's the like the entrance room to the men's restroom. Well, they put my desk in, well, there was a desk. That was my office. Well, I talked with Mr. Humphreys, and in a few days, I said, that isn't comfortable for me. I'm just going to, you know, just be working with teachers, and I don't even need a desk. And he said, no, we'll find you a desk that's not in the men's restroom. Finally let me have an office with a telephone that was mine part of the time. I enjoyed the work, I really did, because I got to meet all these teachers, and I'd work in the classroom with their children, you know, and got a picture somewhere of, we called it In Service for the Teachers. And we did various things, but this picture shows me working with a group of children in a reading class, and out here were the teachers observing me. It was, and we just did a lot of things in the classrooms, and I used I found a vacant room in that building where I had my office, and it had books in there. It was a book room, but I just got the custodian to help me move it, kind of clear out a space, and that's where we could have in-service meetings with groups of teachers. So I had what we called at that time in-service meetings with grade levels, like the first grade. And so once a month, about once a month, I had a meeting with each grade level, see. 1960, and I was in the administration building all of a sudden, and I had my list of schools, and I don't recall right now exactly how many elementary schools we had at that time. I could find out, but my job, of course, again, was to work with the teachers and the principals and the students in each of the schools. And one of them was Mosier Valley. And Mosier Valley is it's south of Hurst. And it's the black community, and I think it was either the first or the biggest black community in Tarrant County. And they had, of course, the school over there. The school was, the first and second grade was taught by Veda Johnson. Veda Johnson eventually, when integration occurred, she was at Wilshire Elementary. When I went over there, I discovered that that was the most impossible situation you could imagine. They had not nearly enough of anything. They needed books, state-adopted books. They needed erasers for their chalkboards. You name it, they needed it. So what I did, I wrote it up and went to see Mr. Humphreys, the superintendent. And then it took a long while, see, because we had to budget and go through the school board and all that. But we, one of the first things we did was open the cafeteria with the necessary equipment. It took a good while to get it all equipped properly. When it came time for us to have a May Day celebration, the parents worked with me, and they made costumes and for their own children, and then others out there that maybe wasn't going to have a costume. And parents came, and we did it, had our May Fete in the backyard, you know, in the May pole dance and all. And Mosier Valley was a delightful place for me to spend some time. Veda Johnson was wonderful. She had lived in Mosier Valley her whole life, and she eventually adopted 3 children. She never married, but she adopted 3 children one summer. When the law passed for integration, it was easily done, really, here in HEB, because of course we'd had some meetings with the principals and the teachers, and we really never did have a big problem. And but in Mosier Valley, because I had been a part of their school, we were already integrated in their minds, you know. We knew what the curriculum was supposed to be like in the first grade. and what children need to have accomplished as first graders before going to second grade. And I followed the state guidelines, of course, and wrote that, and then we had a secretary who typed it for me. But then in addition to that, I had examples of student work in the curriculum guides. And they were thick books about like that, you know, for the teachers to use. And it had to be something that they not only could easily understand and follow, but that it was approved by the state, see. So it was a big ordeal, but it was necessary. I was called consultant or supervisor, I believe. I was called a supervisor at first. And then when Joe Humphreys left, Mr. Wages became our superintendent, and he, this was about two or 3 years later, about 2 years later, I guess. Anyways, he said, I'm going to start calling you an administrative assistant, I believe it was. And then finally, for about the last 8 or 9 years, I was, I guess, I don't remember how many years, I was assistant superintendent. When we were teaching out at Webb, I met a couple at UTA. They just became our friends, and she wanted me to meet the lady that owned the modeling agency, and Neiman was one that we did, like in the spring or in the fall, and then and other places over in Dallas. It was always in Dallas, sometimes at the modeling school on the highway that's still there, you know. Teachers, as all the teachers knew, even, and certainly in the lower grades, but even up in the 6th grade and older, you know, they sat in groups with children, and it was just so important to wear those pants for not only the comfort, but the practical aspect of it. You could walk anywhere else and see the ladies, and I remember I told them even at my church, you know, and if I can wear pants at my church, surely I can wear them, you know. And so I just talked with the superintendent, and he finally agreed. My first thought was to make it a comfortable situation for women teachers when everybody else was already, and as I told the teachers, I said, we can make ourselves not only comfortable, but be sure you're attractive and wear something that looks appropriate for the children, first of all, and then the parents who see you, and everybody who works for HEB. We needed a female to do some of these things, you know. Sid retired in 1984, and he explained to me that one night we were just talking, and he said the problems he was having in his job as principal to do the things that he knew he needed to be able to do and had done all those years. He felt very good about his profession, and everybody else who knew him did. I wasn't ready to retire because I really enjoyed my work, especially going into the schools and working with the teachers and children, you know, and even if it's just to observe their classrooms, it was just a joy for me. But Sid developed Alzheimer's, so I needed to be home with him. And so I kept him at home, and to the point that near the end, he had to have somebody just constantly. During those first years, we still traveled and did different things that were fun for us, you know. And it was a sad time of our lives because everybody knows dementia and Alzheimer's and how it affects the individuals mostly, and then the family. I was retired a long time, and I think that was like the year 2000 when they opened that building. And I can't remember who called and told me. Somebody from the administration, I guess it was the superintendent, called and told me that, you know, it was named Pat May. And of course I was so surprised, and they told me what the plans were for it, how it could be used, how it will be used. And when they first told me about it, you know, I was just totally surprised and honored. And then through the years, that it's, you know, I don't think about it all the time when I go to the meetings, I don't, but it is certainly a great honor to have that. They just called and told me that I had been selected to be the Citizen of the Year, and that was what they gave me that night. I've always been proud of our schools, and it's been a big part of my life. Even after retiring in 1985, I have so many fond memories of my classroom experiences here in Hurst and elsewhere until, you know, coming here. Because children are children, and I thoroughly enjoyed teaching. And that's been a blessing for me to keep in touch with so many of these people. Some are even in my neighborhood. I think some of them I not only taught, but then I worked with them when they became teachers, see. There's so many things that we know that if you relate to children in a very meaningful way as a teacher, know each child as well as you can, but make it a meaningful and appropriate classroom that you can be proud of. And the children, you know, you have to be firm, but they also have to know that you truly care about them for their education and their emotional stability, their whole life. You have to actually care about children in a very special way, and not just some of them, but all of them. And some of them are hard to love, and but you have to care about them and find the right way to care about them. Nowadays, it's just as hard as it was when I was in the classroom. Technology has changed our world, of course. And the specialists that we have in the schools have changed our world, because teachers don't teach everything now like they did when I was teaching. You know, we didn't have the PE teachers or the reading teachers but teacher development or in-service, whatever it's called, I think it's still important. My mother and daddy didn't necessarily talk about it and teach me that this is the way you're supposed to do, but they lived it. The whole atmosphere was nurturing for us. I don't know if I even thought about what I was doing, but it was just a part of me. It has been my life to work here in Hurst. I love Hurst. I just, it means so much to me because it's been so much a part of my life for so many years. I just have the fondest memories of what we've been able to accomplish here in the school district because of the wonderful people who've been so supportive of our schools and our communities. It's just been home to me for so many years. I just never did want to leave.